Hey everyone, this is Anthony Reeves, and let's talk another episode about easy, but not so easy. Today, we're going to talk about moral support, what it is and what it's not. Okay, so this is how a moral support issue pops up. All of a sudden, somebody is going into a situation, whether it be a doctor's appointment, whether it be meeting someone for a business meeting, whether it be a variety of different situations, and they say they don't feel comfortable going by themselves. So what do? They turn to you and say, would you go with me for moral support? Effectively, what they're doing is it's not just so much moral support. It's a lot of times what happens is that they want somebody there who has, in their mind, an objective opinion because they're not as emotionally or financially invested in a particular situation. And they're trusting that by having you there, you're going to be a little bit more clear-eyed about what's going on. And more importantly, you'll be the one to alert them so this way they don't put themselves in a bad situation. I can tell you, that's easy. And you're going to find that's going to happen a lot where you're in this position where you're like, okay, I'm just there to support just in case something jumps off. And that is a great thing to be for people who may not feel comfortable about their circumstances, who truly believe in their heart that they need to have someone there. That's the easy part. But you guessed it, here's the not so easy part. First, you're not the person of interest. Or in a legal setting, you're not the client. What happens sometimes is that when you bring in a third party, and I've seen this countless times, the third party will sit there because they know that the primary person may be shy, reserved, or keeping things back. And so they'll start talking and acting as if, well, since this person is not going to do this, I'm here because they want to make sure it gets done. I'm going to make sure you get it done. Guess what? You're not the client. So what ends up happening is you make things worse because depending on the circumstance, the person who is there is the one that the organization or the agency or the entity or the attorney or the doctor, whatever the case may be, they want to hear from that person. You being there to provide assistance, like if they can't remember something and they turn to you and say, hey, what do you think? Or hey, do you remember this? That's great. But too many times people fall into this trap of thinking that because they've been asked to be called into a situation, that they are now first on deck. That's not how it gets down. So keep in mind that if you've been asked to come for moral support, basically to provide some additional positive reinforcement, or even just to help them remember certain things or pay attention to certain things, that's great. But you are not the primary person. They are. And you may not be the decision maker. What do I mean by this? Sometimes what ends up happening is that when you come into a situation, if you are really knowledgeable about the situation, you may find it upon yourself to want to tell the people who are making a decision what they need to do. So you go in, you have a meeting at an organization, an entity, a county government, or something like that. You've gone through the process, or you're familiar with people who've gone through it and so forth, and you try to tell the person what they should and shouldn't do. Well, I know this is what happens with this person, so you're supposed to do this. Wrong answer. Because guess what? I don't care how well versed you may be in a particular situation, if that's not something you do on a day-to-day basis, they're probably in a better position to tell you what can and can't be done. So what happens is that when you are now in a position of providing support, but you start treating yourself as if you know more than the person who is in the position to make a decision relating to that person, you may end up making things worse. And you're a support, not an advocate. What does that mean? Well, of course, I'm talking from an attorney standpoint, but it doesn't have to just be that. Sometimes what happens is that people, a lot of times when they're bringing in somebody's support, they're looking for somebody who's willing to advocate on their behalf. However, depending on the circumstances, there may be certain things that have to be in place in order for that person to be an advocate, depending on the agency or the organization or the business they're dealing with. Why is that important? Because if the organization says, if you're here to speak on behalf of this person, there are certain instances where we allow that. But you can't backdoor it by saying, well, I'm here to support. Well, I don't really do this thing. I'm just here to help. That is the biggest thing I always see, because it's usually people who use that phrase, oh, well, I'm here to help. What that is, their code word is saying is, well, I'm jumping in where I deem appropriate. Well, no, you don't get that luxury. And depending on the circumstances, whoever you're dealing with may tell you, if that person needs help, I'll let them ask you. If you need to step away, you can do that. But if you're talking about representing them or advocating on their behalf, this is what we require. If you're not prepared to do that, you don't get an opportunity to be a part-time advocate where you see fit. So it's important for you to recognize and remember that when you're in a position to provide some assistance as moral support, you're not there as an advocate on their behalf unless you follow whatever their protocols are for that purpose. Listen, there's nothing wrong with giving moral support to people. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I encourage it. I'm hoping for it. But just remember, at the end of the day, when you're there in that capacity, you're not the primary person of interest, you're not the decision maker, and you're not the advocate. You're there to provide them help if they need it, within the parameters of how that particular individual or entity you're dealing with will allow it. So don't go in there thinking that you're going to kick down the doors and dictate what's going to happen, because by doing so, you may put that person that you're trying to help in a more hurtful position.